Last November, I published a video about how President Trump used to have a license to carry concealed firearms in New York City, a rare privilege, and we looked at the weapons he owned and apparently carried. Check out the link in the end screen if you haven't seen this video yet. It got me thinking about World War II military and political leaders, many of whom appeared in public apparently unarmed, and I wondered whether they too were concealed carrying. Of course, for most World War II leaders, openly carrying firearms was par for the course. Most of the famous generals of both the Allied and Axis routinely carried weapons. Think of General George S. Patton and his ivory-handled pistols. The weapons were part of their uniforms, and sidearms have for a very long time been symbolic of officer rank in many armies. Many of the Axis political leaders were also packing heat in public. Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring with his US Smith & Wesson .38 revolver. Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler and his Valter PP. Or Italian dictator Benito Mussolini, who often carried a Beretta Model 34 9mm semi-automatic pistol. However, some military leaders and political leaders almost always appeared to be unarmed, even in active war zones. So here are 4 prominent examples of World War II leaders who concealed carried. General Dwight D. Eisenhower was supreme Allied commander in Europe in the latter part of World War II, but you won't find many photographs or film of Ike wearing a firearm. As a top US general, you'd have thought he would have had a sidearm, at least in the field, but it seems he didn't. However, it is not well known that Ike was nevertheless armed. He rejected the standard-issue general officer's sidearm of the US military of the period, the Colt 1908 Hammerless Model M, chambered in .380 ACP. He also didn't carry the bigger Colt M1911, the standard sidearm for US officers in World War II. Instead, Ike concealed carried a police gun, a Colt Detective Special, chambered in .38 Special, a 6-shot snub-nose revolver introduced in 1927, a powerful concealable pocket revolver of its day. Updated versions of this pistol remained in production until 1996. Eisenhower carried his Detective Special in a leather holster slipped into his right trouser pocket. This was an issue weapon, and after he retired from the army, Ike returned his Detective Special. German leader Adolf Hitler probably had more reason than any other leader to carry a weapon at all times, due to the over 40 assassination attempts that were made on him between the 1920s and his death in 1945. Hitler, on the rare occasions when he actually openly carried a pistol, chose something from Valter, a company whose products he seemed to favor. Hitler was always surrounded by teams of well-trained SS and army bodyguards, and had no real need to wear a pistol. But during the 1939 invasion of Poland, he visited close to the front lines, and did wear a pistol, evidently because of his proximity to danger and as a symbol of his status as a warlord. It's clear from the photograph that Hitler was wearing a Valter PP holster, presumably holding a PP. The PP standing for Polizeipistole, or police pistol. The PP was a blowback-operated semi-auto introduced in 1929 and still in production today. It's a medium-sized handgun, chambered in 7.65mm or 32 ACP, and was very popular with the German police and German military officers due to its smaller size and reduced weight in comparison with the Luger or Valter P38, which were both 9mm pistols. The PP was not as famous as its smaller cousin, the PPK, which Hitler also owned. It is also likely that Hitler carried a concealed pistol on a daily basis. His SS valet Heinz Linger wrote that Hitler had a special concealed pocket in his trousers that held a small pistol for his personal protection, a Valter Model 8. This little 8-round 6.35mm or 25 ACP semi-automatic entered production in 1920. Weighing only 12.5 ounces or 350 grams, it made an ideal backup gun and was used as such by several high-ranking officers, SS and party officials, and also Luftwaffe and Panzer crews who operated in confined spaces. The Valter PP was actually developed out of the Model 8. And what of Hitler's arch-nemesis during World War II, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin? No stranger to firearms due to his earlier revolutionary activities, did the Soviet leader conceal carry? The answer is most probably yes. Stalin certainly never appeared in public open carrying a firearm. Like Hitler, he was exceptionally well protected by an entire regiment of bodyguards. But it seems that, like Hitler, he had a small-frame, small-caliber semi-auto concealed on his person most of the time. Many have claimed that Stalin's tunic had a special pocket for carrying a small pistol. The weapon of choice was allegedly a TK 6.35mm pistol. The TK, or Korolev as it's often known, after the inventor, entered Soviet service in 1927, being in fact the first Soviet-made semi-auto and remained in production until 1935, with over 500,000 being made. Introduced for police and gendarmerie use, it was often carried by Red Army commanders and Communist Party officials, the NKVD secret police being a major customer. The magazine holds 8 rounds, which is 2 more than most other 6.35mm semi-autos of the pre-war period. If Stalin concealed carried this pistol, the Korolev would have been an excellent choice. It's lightweight, small, and it's Soviet-made. And indeed, a Korolev personally owned by Stalin was passed to the Central Museum of the Armed Forces in Moscow following his death in 1953, which tends to confirm the authenticity of the story. Our final World War II leader who definitely concealed carried is the redoubtable British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, a self-confessed gun enthusiast and a highly experienced former soldier who had seen plenty of action, including having personally killed men in combat. Churchill had a large collection of sporting rifles and shotguns, plus quite a number of pistols and revolvers, and even submachine guns, many of them presentation pieces. On his death in 1965, his firearms license still had 17 weapons listed on it, including the US M1 carbine. More information about this aspect of Churchill's life can be found in my video on this subject. Please see the link in the end screen. Churchill, unlike President Roosevelt or Hitler or Stalin, only had one full-time detective acting as his personal bodyguard during World War II, and further security was provided as and when needed at events by police and/or soldiers. Churchill had learned early on the value of carrying a concealed handgun. And when Churchill discovered early in World War II that his bodyguard, Police Inspector Thompson, was only armed with a Webley .32 caliber semi-automatic pistol, Churchill wasn't impressed. Churchill owned a Webley, and it was notorious for jamming, so Churchill asked the War Office for a more powerful and modern American Colt M1911 and gave one to Thompson. Thompson, however, apparently disliked the larger semi-auto and kept carrying the Webley instead. On discovering this, Churchill demanded the 1911 back, and from then on he carried it himself in his overcoat pocket, or inside his suit pocket, or in a holster on his right hip underneath his clothing. The distinctive bulge of the 1911 having been noted by researchers from examining photographs and film of Churchill. However, Churchill wasn't armed all of the time, for as Thompson recorded, the Prime Minister often forgot to bring his 1911 with him. Wherever he was sleeping, he was usually within arm's length of a handgun. As Thompson recalled, quote, "It was of course critical that Churchill should not be alone at any time, even in the middle of the night in his own bed, without a revolver in reach. He would draw his gun and pop it into sudden view and say roguishly and with delight, 'You see, Thompson, they will never take me alive. I will get 1 or 2 before they take me down.'" And on that delightful image, many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.